Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Sophia. I am Sophia Ufi Uko. I am the founder of Violet Simon. Violet Simon is a media company that uses authentic storytelling to amplify the voices and experiences of diverse women in order to push representation and equality, inspire others, entertain, and generate calls to action on key women's issues in all categories of life. Conversations with Sophia is a talk show where we bring in guests to explore these themes. And today we have my very good friend, Rebekah Lloyd, who is also the founder of This Independent Life. And we are going to be talking about endometriosis and independence for women. So, hi, Rebekah.
Hi, Sophia.
Finally, we're talking, finally talking. And I'm so excited to have you here because Rebekah is amazing. I am actually inspired by her. She may not know, but I am. Her story, her journey, and what she does for women, the passion, and she's literally she's a genuine leader. She's genuinely passionate about what she does and advocating for equality and independence for women, and also which covers every area from women's health to women's rights and so many other things. And so I'm going to start today with asking you, let's start with your experience with endo. What was your experience with endo? How did you find out that you had endometriosis?
So firstly, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, your words are too much and I absolutely mirror them. You're amazing and I just love everything that you're doing with this podcast. So firstly, thank you. I just wanted to say that. So my endometriosis journey, I was actually funnily writing a blog post about it this morning. So I feel like it's very fresh in my mind, but it's really hard to sum up, in all honesty. It's something that took me 10 years to get diagnosed. And unfortunately, that's not uncommon. On average, it takes about 7 to 10 years for women to get diagnosed. And for me personally, it was, a pretty up and down experience, something which started at university with my friend who is, was a housemate, is now my dear friend, coming in and being like, why are you in bed? Why aren't you getting up? And thinking I was hungover. And actually, I was in so much pain that I could barely stand. So that was kind of where it started, going to the doctors, just basically being turned away every time, either with stronger painkillers, never really being asked to investigate it, to see maybe if there was something causing the pain. It was always just very much like, you're kind of an easy one to get out the office. And again, I say this very, sweepingly, because I know what it's like to work in the NHS, at least in the UK. I have family who are nurses and doctors. I understand the pressures that people are under. However, now, 10 years later, knowing how many women have been through the exact same experience, like, that's not a coincidence. And for me, it took, 2 years through COVID. It got so bad that my partner actually was the one that ended up saying, right, enough is enough. And I basically forced myself, plucked up the courage, because once you've done this a few times and you've been turned away, you kind of think, well, what the hell? Like, maybe it's all in my head, maybe I'm crazy, you make up these excuses. And then, finally got a referral, finally saw a physician. And then, long story short, essentially they did a scan, which was like this insane, like, huge thing that like they shove inside you, and the whole experience is not enjoyable at all. But then sort of got this like tentative diagnosis, because the thing with endometriosis as well, which is worth noting, is there is actually no definitive test that is non-invasive. In 2022, there's no blood test, there's no urine test. You can't actually diagnose it unless you do laparoscopic surgery. So I had to have surgery, and was really fortunate that I had health insurance on my previous employer. So I was able to get that in 2 months. On the NHS, it takes women 2 years to get that surgery. So it's crazy. And again, there's many reasons for that, but I think it's something that, it has to change, because ultimately it was either do that or like do it on my private health insurance, or go into the NHS and wait for 2 years and just be in pain for 2 more years. And it pains me, because there are so many women that are doing that, and it's just not good enough. So my diagnosis journey was long, but I feel like now I've had surgery. I had an endometrioma that was removed. I would like to say it's done, but endometriosis is a chronic condition. So it's something that I will have for life. It's something that potentially could affect my ability to have children. It could, recur. Many women have multiple surgeries. So I may have to have another surgery in future, but then that may not be the case. I may be one of the lucky ones who just has this and it's done, but it's not like you go away and you can sort of just, it's dealt with. It's something which I now have to kind of manage, and it's symptom managed. So when I ask the doctor, what's the follow-up? There is no follow-up. The follow-up is essentially how much pain is enough to then go back to the doctor. So it's a funny one. It's difficult. And that's why, I'm really inspired by other women, and it inspired me to also create my own support group, because I think it's really important to have a space to just have real talk about the condition. And whilst there is some amazing support out there, I personally couldn't really connect with, just the environment and the kind of feeling of some of these groups that are there. And I personally think that the emotional, psychological side, like the toll that it takes on your life, on your relationships, on your work, on, all these things that you don't really think about and aren't really talked about, that for me is where there's a need for more support and the need to help other women who are going through this experience, and ultimately make sure that women know they're not alone, and that you don't have to be in pain in silence. You don't have to just be living with this thing or this experience. Like, there is help out there for you, and it can be better. So yeah.
Amazing. And you talked about the toll it takes on you. I was actually just going to ask you, how has that been for you throughout this journey? You said 7 years, and what has the toll been on you mentally? Were you able to get support, and are you getting support? How do you cope with that, even living with the constant, will I say, fear that it could come back, and how do you then deal with it? How's that like?
It's a good question. I don't know, honestly. It's something that I'm kind of working through every day. It's still fairly fresh. It's not even been a year since I've been diagnosed. We're recording this in September. I got diagnosed in November of 2021. So to be honest, like, I don't really have a kind of way of dealing with it beyond, I think, just trying to talk about it, which sounds kind of basic, but I think for me, and I know that this is the same for a lot of women as well, there's like a shame that comes with talking about your issues, and you almost feel like a burden talking about your pain, and you're just, constantly saying the same thing. And I think, to be honest, the biggest support for me, I think, has actually been from my partner. And I think from having someone who's just there, whether it's like bringing me ginger tea or like bringing me a wheat bag that he's heated up in the microwave, to just like sitting with me, like rubbing my back, like when I can't really talk, or, I'm struggling a lot or having a bad day. I think it's really about having support and being able to feel like you're not having to go through it yourself. But it is really hard. And to be honest, it's something that it's almost like constantly there. And I think that's the biggest thing with endometriosis, is you can't like forget about it. So it's not like, you get a chest infection, you take antibiotics and it's done. That fear of it coming back and trying to deal with that, honestly, I don't really have the answer. And I think it's something that I'm trying to manage, so that it's not something that does become overwhelming in front of mind. And I started using like a tracking app to track my pain, to try and see if it's correlated to my menstrual cycle, and trying to just, I guess, control it, for want of a better word. And I think through getting that information, I'm hoping that will help me start seeing if there are correlations, and then if there are, more times where I'm in pain, or, it's starting to become more common, I can actually see that. Because what tends to happen is it almost blurs into one. And so, from being in pain every day, it's almost hard to know what it's like to not be in pain, which is a crazy like paradox. And it's sad to even have to say that. But yeah, it's hard. I'm not going to lie. It's shit. And it's something I'm still working through, honestly. I don't really have an answer. I think it's just about trying to be kind to myself and trying to be aware of what my triggers are as well. So often with endometriosis and any kind of chronic condition, there's triggers. For me, mine is stress. So now, as someone as well who's like a new business owner, and I'm really passionate about my work, I'm having to be very mindful of actually, okay, I can't do everything, because I know that will trigger my pain. So I think it's just about being aware and trying to be more in tune with my body, and just having that self-awareness to say, okay, if I've taken on too much, I need to take a step back, because if I don't, it's going to kind of start this cycle again. So yeah, it's definitely a journey in itself, figuring out how to actually kind of cope and not have it just take over your life, because it really can.
I'm so sorry you're going through that. I'm sorry. And I just hope by even sharing your story and your journey, some other person can find solace, and even you can also, realize how far you've come. And I'm just so sorry about everything. And now you talked about your career, which we're going to move into now. You've mentioned previously that you left your previous job. Why did you leave your previous job? What was the journey? Why did you leave your previous job? Now you're starting a business. So can you walk us through, tell me about why you left your previous job, what made you leave your previous job, and what made you start your own business? What has that journey been like? It must be so, I want to hear it.
Oh yeah, that's a long one too, but again, I'll try and be succinct. Before I left my career, my previous career I should say, I used to work in healthcare and pharmaceutical advertising and communication. So essentially I would be partnering with pharmaceutical companies to help them launch products and do disease awareness campaigns, patient support programs, etc. And for the last 4 years I had been working for an independent agency, so I'd been headhunted, and I had basically founded their London office. So that was incredible. It gave me an amazing insight into, startup life and all the things that it takes to run a business, because I was wearing about 20 hats, like head of operations, recruitment, client service, finance, all of the above. And that was amazing. And it gave me a real kind of rich, just like a really rich and just amazing experience, and just learning that it's not just about saying, oh yeah, I'm the founder of a company, and oh yeah, you're going to be successful overnight, which I think a lot of people talk about, and it almost gives this false sense of like success and what it means to actually run a business. So I was doing that, and that was great, but I think I was just starting to think throughout COVID, I think particularly, that I wasn't really happy. In fact, I was miserable, to be honest. I had gone from feeling, really proud of what I was doing, like I was, excelling, I was moving up, I was feeling challenged. That had all kind of gone, and I started feeling very stuck. And I think what tends to happen, again, having spoken to a lot of women since then, is that, and people generally, to be honest, is that, your 20s, you're working your way up the ladder, and you're kind of chasing, the titles and the money, and, your definition of success, or what you think success is, at least what I thought success was, partly dictated by, family or your influences around you, I think very much create what you then end up doing. And that was really what I was chasing. And then I think I sort of had this time during COVID where all the things that I liked about my job, like the traveling and the kind of meeting people and getting creative together and all those kind of very visceral, using your brain, like actually feeling stimulated in that way, had kind of gone. And I just sort of thought, well, there's just, there has to be more. It was almost like a gut feeling where I was like, I know there is more out there, but I just don't know what it is. And so from then I started thinking, okay, like, what the hell am I going to do next? And to be honest, it all kind of came to a head, and I had pretty much like a full-on mental breakdown, and I had to take a week off work, and I had never had that happen to me before. I was always someone that was like very, buttoned up. No one could see behind the veneer. I would never let anyone see me shake or, imposter syndrome, all those kind of things. Like, that wasn't a thing. Well, it was a thing, but it wasn't a thing that I let anyone knew. And I think, again, it just all came sort of crashing down, and I just realized physically that I couldn't do it anymore. So after that, yeah, I started looking at on LinkedIn, going through like job descriptions, saying, okay, if I don't do this, I can do that. But to be honest, it was just a bunch of jargon. Nothing made any sense. I was just like, okay, well, this is a complete waste of my time. I tried to find a career course and sort of see if I could actually be a little bit more specific in what I was doing, which to be honest wasn't great. I ended up actually doing a really amazing course by a woman called Tiwalolo Ogunlesi. She's got a company called Confident in Killing It. And I signed up to her program, and have to say that was probably the main program that shifted everything for me. And that was actually really focused on confidence. And I originally signed my sister up because she was really struggling herself. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should do it myself. And it's, I don't know, I just mentioned that because I think it's funny when you just do something, or you have like a tiny, tiny little feeling about something, like trust that. You have to trust that, because those are the things that I think actually lead to what you should be doing in your life. And yeah, doing that, I ended up kind of thinking about, okay, what are my passions? What are my strengths? What do I care about? What do I actually enjoy, like as a human being? Like, don't think about work, don't think about anything, just what makes me full, what lights me up, what brings me joy. And through that process, I started realizing, okay, I want to help women. I want to be able to have control over my life. I want to have freedom of choice in anything that I do in my life, whether it's my personal life, my professional life, whether it's going on holiday, or, whatever it is. I want to be able to have that autonomy over my time in a way that I didn't feel I could get working for another company. And so that was almost like the kind of, okay, I think I'm ready. I'm not ready, but I'm just going to take a risk and go for it, because after speaking to different people, and what you'll learn, and what you'll obviously probably have experienced, is that like there is never a good time to start a business. There's always an excuse. You can always come up with something. And I speak to women all the time, and they're, I can feel that they want more, and they're just scared. And again, I hope that, that's something that comes with time. And I'm trying to tell as many women as possible, because I'm like, the more people talk about it, the more you don't have to be in these situations where you're stuck. And that's really what drives me, is helping other women kind of come to that point. But then just to kind of pull it around a little bit into where I actually came up with the business idea, was that in parallel, my endometriosis was happening, which I've just explained. And then what was also happening, so I was buying a house with my partner, which I never thought I was going to be able to do. I had managed to save up money through COVID, because I wasn't going out to eat and drink, which is basically all I spent my money on. And so we were able to buy a house, it was locked down, so we were able to negotiate a good price, etc., etc. But I realized I had absolutely no idea how to manage my money. And I was 30 years old. I didn't know how to get a mortgage. I didn't know what a stocks and shares ISA was. I didn't understand anything beyond putting your money in the savings account. And to be honest, like, I grew up with a single mom. She's a nurse. She got paid terribly. We had like free school meals. Like, it wasn't a situation where you had money in abundance necessarily all the time. So I just had never been exposed to it. And, at the same time, I started looking into it and realizing, wow, like, the stats of the people that own the stock market and, people who are wealthy, it's basically all men, or an extreme majority of men. And then I started looking at stats of like, okay, it's like 8% of FTSE 100 CEOs are women, all these stats about gender pay gap, let alone the health gap, which I was mentioning before. And just all these different areas where ultimately women just aren't able to have autonomy over their life. And that for me was the kind of light bulb moment where it's like, okay, it's independence for women. It's actually helping women be in control of their life, but not in like a kind of crazy, like negative way, in like an abundant way, in a way which allows them to just live the life that they want. And that's it. There doesn't have to be any ifs and buts and caveats and all these things. I think generally women tend to kind of add these little tag-ons of whatever it is. And actually, no, I think there's so many barriers for women in the world. And I want to basically help break down the barriers without sounding cheesy, but actually doing something which is practical, is informative. Knowledge is power. And I think giving women the knowledge that they need to take control of their life and to make those decisions and feel confident about those decisions, like, that's what kind of lights me up. And that's what I'm trying to do with my business.
Amazing. And you're doing incredibly well. Um,
Thank you.
and the journey, I think the journey with like starting a business, like you said, um, there's no perfect moment. And even the process and the journey itself of like doing the business and the toll it takes on you, how do you manage stress? How do you manage like, juggling that? Because right now you're doing this full time, right? And how do you juggle the stress of starting up a business and you know the rejections initially, because there are going to be lots of rejections when you start a business, and people don't talk about the rejections you encounter when you're starting a business, especially when this is something that I know is relevant, this is something I know is incredibly important. Listen to what I have to say, listen to what I have to give. I have so much. How do you deal with that? It could be, I talking from experience, because I know sometimes it pisses me off and I'm just like, to hell with all this. you know so how do you handle that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, rejection is part of life, is what I'm learning, and definitely in business. And I think, on the practical side, I had saved up about 6 months of kind of buffer to see me through from when I quit my job, which I think is important to mention, because I think a lot of times people don't really think about those very practical sides of things. And I would never encourage anyone to quit their job or do anything if they hadn't really thought about those your bills need to be covered. You don't want to be stressing about that kind of stuff. On the flip side, I am now starting to stress about that kind of stuff because my fund is running out, because everything's getting more expensive and, things change and things happen in life. So you can't tell the future, right? No one has a glass ball. But I think it's really important to just be aware that like it will happen. And again, that sounds really like affirmation-y and kind of wooey, but on the days where I'm like crying and thinking, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm just going to go back and get a job. Like, this just isn't worth it. It's just kind of thinking, taking a step back and just reminding yourself why you're doing what you're doing. And I think for me, it's really trying to get comfortable with the ups and downs, because they are extreme ups and they are extreme downs. And I think that's one thing that I don't think you can really ever be prepared for that, honestly. And it's something that I've heard from many other founders, that you just, in a way, it can be quite addictive. And I can sort of understand why, people end up getting very, serial entrepreneurs and all these things, because there is a real buzz that you get from whether it's just sending out cold emails and getting no replies, and then you get this one reply and it's just like, wow, it kind of, you forget about all the failure in that moment. And I think it's just that, like, really kind of focusing on your wins, and I'm really trying to focus on the positives. And I think there are days where it's really hard. And, yesterday was one of them. I was like crying on the sofa. My partner comes home and he's like, what the hell is going on? But it just became overwhelming. And I think that's reality. And I think, just again, like I was saying before, with managing stress with endo, it's kind of the same. It's just trying to be kind to myself, trying to be aware, trying to know when actually my energy is low and actually I have too many calls. I may need to cancel some of those calls, and not trying to force things or do things because you think you have to do them. And just being honest. I think honesty and being vulnerable and being authentic in business, in life, really, is something which people don't fully appreciate. I think it's very underestimated. And I think that that's something that I try and do that through all my talks, through the events, my podcast. Like, that's kind of a theme. I like to make sure that people are able to be themselves and are able to share in a way which isn't, there's no judgment there. There shouldn't be any shame in what you're saying. And yeah, I think it's just making sure that you're just living your truth. So I just try and go about things in a way where, as long as I feel good about it and I know that I'm doing it for the right reasons and ultimately for, my mission at large, helping other women to achieve independence, it's almost like my North Star, which I hate the term North Star because it's so businessy and, whatever. But it's really like having that kind of guide to just focus on and just think, okay, even if today's a shit day, I know it's going to get better, and just kind of trusting in the process a little bit. And I think through that, it's like a muscle, like it gets easier. And even in the last 6 months, I feel like I'm so much more resilient. And I think resilience is the one thing that people don't talk about enough as well, because a lot of people say, you know, failed businesses are just someone who gave up too soon. And I'm really trying to kind of hold on to that. And even though it's bloody hard sometimes, like, I just know that it's going to work out. And I think just trusting that and trusting in my abilities, trusting in my passion, and just, yeah, just kind of going for it.
That's amazing, and you're doing so well already. And just before I let you go, want to touch on the fact of your academic background, because you've mentioned before that, you know, you come from a heavily academic background. So, and when I converse with people, so I come from a similar background as well. There's this thing of wow, and then you're talking about because, well, I have like several degrees.
Yeah, more than me.
And so, and for you, you know, what's that, you know, just talk briefly about what that background was like for you and the toll it took on you, you know, and the expectations, the toll that took on you.
Yeah, I mean, I was someone who like didn't really know what to do at school. I wasn't someone that kind of always knew what I wanted to do and have this very clear path. You know, like my mum was a nurse since she since she left school and has done that her whole career. I was never kind of like that. But I always had pressures, at least really, to be completely honest, from my dad, basically saying if you're not, you know, being a doctor, then you're not going to be respected. So I always had this like, okay, I should probably be a doctor to please my parents, because obviously everyone wants to please their parents. Like, it's so cliche. So at university, at school, there was no career education, period. At university, it was basically, yeah, one lecture that said you can either work in scientific research, you can work in the pharmaceutical industry, or you can be a doctor. And that was basically it. So I was like, okay, I'll try being a lab researcher because I really liked science. So I tried that, did a bunch of different placements across various different things. I worked in a cancer research lab. I worked in a zebrafish regeneration lab. I worked in a muscular dystrophy, like working on blood research, tried a bunch of different things and just didn't enjoy it. It was like way too, I think, niche for me. It's like you become such an expert in this one tiny little thing, but I was missing that kind of human, that social side. So I was like, okay, that's not for me. I tried to be a doctor. I applied twice. I got rejected twice. So I was like, okay, this clearly isn't for me. And I'm going to kind of put this dream aside. And now I'm like, wow, thank God, because I feel like I would actually be a terrible doctor. And, you know, the patience that you have to have. And I see my sister, who's like the perfect person to be a doctor. She's absolutely incredible. And I'm just like, wow, like, that's such a relief. I felt like I really like got away, which again, I think, you know, you have these things in your head and you think you're meant to be doing this thing. And if I'm really true to myself, like, I don't think I ever really wanted to be a doctor, you know, and it's just kind of, you're trying to do things to please people, and it's trying to get out of that people pleasing mentality that, yeah, it's hard because you do it, you know, a lot of your life, I think, especially as women. But yeah, so did that and then ended up then saying, okay, well, my only other option is pharma. So I started working for a pharma company. I was basically working to market a schizophrenia medication. And I also hated it. So I was like, okay, well, what else am I going to do then? Like, these are my only options. And luckily, as a friend I was working with basically said, oh, actually, I just spoke to this recruiter, like, maybe have you thought about healthcare advertising? And like, essentially just doing that and giving that a go, and that combination of the science and the art, because I'd done art at school and I really loved it. And actually my school had told me that I had to drop maths because I would bring the school's grades down. So I should do art instead. So again, it's kind of like this weird thing, which at the time I was like, God, that's hideous. But now I'm so glad, because it meant that I could have that creative outlet and I could actually do that thing that I actually enjoyed instead of doing math, which I basically thought I had to do to be a doctor, you know? So I think it's just that pressure and that kind of intensity in people thinking that, you know, getting degrees and all this is still like the be all and end all. And I think now there's a real shift happening away from that, which I think is amazing, because actually it's not about just going to university, racking up loads of debt just so you can say, I've got a degree. Actually now you can learn so many things online, you know, like the internet didn't exist. LinkedIn didn't exist when I was at university. Like, that alone as a resource is just invaluable. And I say to people who I mentor, like, just to message people. I know it's terrifying, but again, it's like a muscle, like I was saying before, the more you do it, the more you realize the worst that can happen is they don't reply or they say no. And like, that's fine. And actually, if they say no, then you're just getting redirected into a different direction. And Yeah, I think taking that pressure off and taking those expectations off and taking that, this is the path that I should be doing, because it's not the path that you should be doing. And I think it's really sad when there are people that just aren't, naturally academically not gifted, it's not the word, but there are some people that are, and they're amazing. My brother, he's like super smart, went to Cambridge, he's like proper doing that whole thing. And that's amazing, but like that was never me, and that will never be me probably, and that's okay. And I think it's just about thinking about how you can turn that into something that can actually fuel you, because actually I learned a lot of skills through that kind of heavy academic, that pressure. You know a lot about boundaries, and now I actually think that is paying dividends in what I'm doing now. But yeah, I don't know, it's a hard question, honestly, because there's so much value in academia and in doing things like that, and education. I'm so passionate about education. That's what I'm doing now. But I think it's important to remember that education doesn't have to be going to a university, getting a master's degree, doing a PhD. Like, that doesn't mean that you're successful, and that may not be the right thing for you. It's about, what do you actually like? What lights you up? Like I was saying earlier, what actually do you enjoy? Like, what makes you fulfilled? And focusing on that, and just trying to use that and be sensitive to people around you, whether it is parents or family members, just kind of kindly saying to them and reminding them, like, that's what, maybe you want me to do, but actually this is my life. And, it's just about having that communication and being really honest again, just being honest, open, just transparent about what you actually want. And then I think, regardless of what it is, whether it's academic, whether it's business, whether it's, you want to be a pop star, whatever, like, you can take that. And as long as you learn from it, all experiences are good experiences, in my opinion. So
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. I've lots of gems from Rebekah on today's episode. It was lovely having you on this show. I hope you I hope you're able to, if you're listening or watching, I hope you're able to get some things, be inspired, and learn a lot of things, be it from endometriosis, independence, career, entrepreneurship, so many things. Even in coming from an academic ground, if that's you, I hope you're able to learn a lot of things from that. So you can follow Rebekah and find a lot about what she does on This Independent Life on her website. We're going to include that on the description of this episode. And if you haven't gotten a copy of the series 1 of our magazine book Disruptors, please do so on our website. Again, details in the description of this episode. Thank you, Rebekah, for coming, and have a lovely week, everyone listening. Once again, I'm Sophia Uko, and thank you for watching Conversations with Sophia. Have a lovely day. Bye.